All right, welcome back. Thank you everybody for coming back, which is really nice because I know it's supper time, but this is going to be a really interesting conversation. So David, thank you for agreeing to moderate. At least that's what it's here, unless you're not moderating. Do you know you're moderating?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, just
I
the
have
look,
my notes here.
the look on your face there for a second, I wasn't sure. So how social procurement promotes capacity building, workforce development, business resilience, and inclusion is the title of the panel. And we have Rob McClellan, Mary Lynn Taylor, Constanza Safatli, and Roseanne Leonard. So I guess over to you, David, how you want to work the panel, but we're really happy to have everybody here with us today. So on over to you.
I think, first of all, we should explain that these chairs are really low. I'm a small person, but...
No, I was talking all day about how I finally felt like I fit. Because I once had a very executive board member say to me, "Sure, you're short." And I said, "Yeah." "You're just as tall standing up as you are sitting down." So this is great.
So cinematographer is going to have a great, and everyone watching this video is going to have a great time looking at microphones because we're all above them so well, right? So thanks. This is a great conversation. I really look forward to it because this is where we get to talk about stories and we get to talk about what people are doing in community and why they're doing it. And I love moderating because I don't have to follow some of the rules that normal moderators do. And so I don't read the bios out to you to tell you who's up here. I actually turn to you and say, like, who are you and what do you do?
Go, ready?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Roseanne Leonard. I'm the Managing Director with the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Community Business Development Corporations, CBDCs, much easier to say. I've been involved, I've been a part of that organization for 20 years, and what we do is we support rural communities. And when we say rural, that means in Newfoundland and Labrador, anything outside of St. John's and Mount Pearl. And how do we support that? Community business development. And this is such an important lead into how we want to support and how we think our communities can support the province.
Okay, the other end.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rob McClellan, and I'm Director of Employment Services with Stella Circle. And I have been a community developer, social entrepreneur, and social worker for approximately the last 20 years. Great passion right now is with helping with the employment initiatives and at Stella Circle, level the playing field for individuals who've experienced all sorts of intersecting oppressions and barriers to fully participating in their communities, and of course that is also including employment. So it's great to be here and engage in the conversation here with the panel and everyone.
Mary Lynn.
My name is Mary Lynn Taylor, and I am the Manager of Retail and Production at Choices for Youth. I have 2 social enterprises on my current portfolio with Choices for Youth. That is Neighborhood Thrift Store and The Shop, which is a small-scale production facility. I also am a business owner a couple of times over in the private space and current client of the CBDC in my outside role. So I've been with Choices for Youth for almost 5 years, and yeah, that's it for me.
Constanza.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Constanza Safatli. I am the owner of Newborn Lander Baby Store, a for-profit social enterprise that I started 5 years ago in answer as a newcomer women to enter to the labor market. And the goal of the business is create employment opportunities for newcomer women that are outside of the labor market, try to empower them, and then try to help them to connect with a meaningful job. We're training them in sewing skills. They didn't touch a sewing machine before, same than me. And I am a lawyer back home, and I moved here 7 years ago, so I identify as an immigrant woman. And also, I am the executive director at Task Force NL, a non-for-profit social enterprise, and that started in 2020 as an answer to support the healthcare system to tackle COVID and manufacturing the PPE. And today, we are standing up by immigration, trying to empower employers and empower them to hiring international talents, help them to navigate the immigration ecosystem, and make them feel that they are the big key in this province to help in retention.
So, Marilyn, start with you. You talk about what you do. Why do you do it?
So I got involved with Choices for Youth from, and I guess as a private sector background, an entrepreneur by definition, I think my whole life. And I've always had an understanding that there was sort of a better way to do business. And so I have a long time history with some people in the room, and the opportunity came up by way of Choices for Youth just to volunteer. They were toying with the idea of opening a thrift store. Now, I am heavily involved in the circular economy retail space, in fashion and thrift, vintage, designer resale, all that stuff. I worked on it on a global level, and I had an opportunity to go volunteer. And so for me, it could have been just a volunteer opportunity, but it actually started to marry together all the things I cared most about, which was small business, community, economic development, volunteering, reused clothing, all of the things that made me feel good. The whole package came forth as by way of opportunity. And when I found out what the mandate was, which was to offer meaningful employment, all of a sudden it made the thing that I already was naturally very passionate about feel a lot less fickle. I'm working in an industry that promotes, fashion and looks, and it gets a bad rep, and deservingly so, but there's a way to do it that involves, making things better for a lot of people. And it's been really, really eye-opening and actually just life-changing to do this work, because something that for me was a privilege to do is now my purpose. And so I do what I do because I am one of the lucky ones that gets to do what I love and help people along the way. And I'm very passionate about community development, and I'm very passionate about equal employment opportunity, and I believe that all work is good work. So whether that is retail or that is you are a brain surgeon, all work is good, all work is valid, all work is meaningful and important. So that's why I do what I do.
And you moved from the commercial side to doing social enterprise in the last couple of years? So when you think about the businesses you're operating, and we know they're businesses, social enterprises, but what drives you when you get there?
Well, I think the big reason to me to when I started my business was a for-profit business and just that. And then I feel so empty trying to think that the pain that I am solving is making baby accessories to make them look beautiful. And that is nice, it's really nice. But I feel so empty by that. So, and then I realized that as an immigrant woman, I was outside of the labor market. That is why I created my business, because it was an answer to a systematic barrier that many women have. I didn't have access to English classes or really basic services to enter and find a meaningful job. So after get that two things, I thought, you know what, I learned to sew watching videos in YouTube. I can teach everyone. You don't need to speak English to sew. And many women like me, professional women that decide to come here are not able to enter to the labor market, so I can create that opportunity. And then, and I'm a huge advocate for social enterprise and immigration. I understand what means social enterprise, because I think actually that we have a lack of education here about what is social enterprise, and that a for-profit business can be a social enterprise. So when I understand my social purpose, thanks to Common Good Solutions, because I made a great training there, thanks to my employer, that at that time was YWCA, that I paid for that training, I give the shape to my company to say, well, this is 100% social enterprise. So I think that awareness helped me actually to push better and more, with more intention to grow the business. And today, the way in how we measure our growth is not about how much profit we do at the end of the year. It is how many employment positions we are able to create every year.
Roseanne, working in rural communities, tiny markets.
Tiny markets with big potential. It's interesting to see the types of ideas and the creativeness and the drive to want to make something in your own backyard, but see it sell and achieve huge levels outside of your community, your province, and your country. It's more and more achievable, or at least people anticipate. They know that they don't have to just try and sell within their communities. So even while you are living that life that you choose in a rural community, and there are great many benefits to being able to live, grow old, raise a family in rural communities, the opportunities still need to be there for people to be able to put down those roots. A couple of years, actually about 10 years ago, maybe even 12, there was a business on the Northern Peninsula. It was a floral shop. And the owner could not find anybody to take it over. And so what the community did, recognizing that this business was an employment generator, it generated revenue, and it provided, things of beauty. So a couple of the organizations in the community took it over, turned it into a nonprofit. And so what that nonprofit then did, it still kept those jobs in that community, and it employed a youth. This youth was going back and forth to school to CNA and got a business degree. And what did this person do when they graduated their degree? They came back and bought the business, turned it into a for-profit again. So the whole concept of trying to do things differently in a rural community is definitely there, but being able to recognize how you can scale up and or partner with other organizations to make sure that those roots are really nice and deep and you are providing jobs and generating money. There are so many creative ways to do it, and so social procurement is certainly one way, not just in the for-profit sector, but also in the nonprofit, community enterprise, and social enterprises.
15 years ago, when you guys started Stellus, what was the purpose then, and has it changed?
I'm gonna say no. I think it's been evolution of an approach, I guess, that was a very, at the time, entrepreneurial approach that ties into storytelling, and as you referenced, just to say that, so the Hungry Heart opened its doors to the public in April of 2008, and it was inspired by a potluck cafe and catering in the downtown east side of Vancouver. Our executive director at the time, Jocelyn Green, was in Vancouver, saw this and said, geez, we could do a cafe, it's looks interesting. But there's a quote attributed to folk singer and activist Pete Seeger, and Pete's American activist, and Pete says, participation's what's going to save the human race. And I think if there's an underpinning to at least our kind of our workforce development, capacity building, skills development, human capital side of what Joss was thinking about with the Hungry Heart at the time, and what continues today, is helping to level the playing field and create those developmental opportunities for people to explore their gifts that were, from a group of people who often don't have, or often actually receiving messaging that, it's the absence of gifts. So it's very much capacity building. So I would say to you that it's evolved, it's changed, the scale and all the things, but not the underlying reasons.
So when we look at all of you doing these really great small, medium, large businesses with a social purpose, how important is it for you to be seen in the market and to actually have people buying? You want to start, Lynn?
Sure. So I guess if I look at neighborhood and the shop, so our mandate has been providing, equitable workplace opportunities for young people who are trying to edge their way towards competitive employment or post-secondary education. So when people cross our doors, they have a self-identified barrier. So it's all great that they can come work at Neighborhood. Neighborhood right now it's doing amazing. It's a thrift store that is a staple in the community. We've got a great, branding package. We've got a great staff. We have youth that are, at any given time, there are 6 to 10 young people that are employed there and earning EI-eligible hours. But what happens when those young people leave our store? So our mandate is about the young people, not about the clothes we sell. So it's wonderful that we have huge, we've had a record-breaking month in October, for example. That's wonderful. But if the work in our business is not recognized and people don't understand what we do, why are we doing it? Because as you said, and I love that you gave the example that while social enterprise may not have existed, there may have been a few thrift stores, and I'm thinking, our thrift store is not like that thrift store, and here's why. But you may not have, you may not even known that, and fair enough, but our thrift store, being just a thrift store, is not the point. The point is that everybody who works in that store is there earning a fair wage, working their way towards the next step, and when they leave us, they're going to be looking for entry points into the competitive marketplace or to get into post-secondary education. And so even if post-secondary education is achieved, what they've done with us is extremely important because we want to see those folks continue on into the competitive space at some point. So it's important that our business is seen and recognized as a valid and legit business, and that experience is just the same on paper for those young people. And so for us to be known means that our business is growing and we can employ more young people, but more importantly than that is supposing we only serve 10 young people, that those young people have futures beyond what they do in our business. So to me, it's kind of like a reverse way of looking at business. We want you to come shop, and it's great to make money and put all that money back into our programming. But at the end of the day, I need you to care about the purpose of the business, which is the young people. So yeah, neighborhood is there, 38 Pearson Street, come shop, we'd love to have you. But also know that we are Choices for Youth Social Enterprise, and everybody who serves you is there by choice, there by chance, and looking to move forward. And so our messaging is critical beyond just that transaction. So when you speak about money as an exchange, that's a real living example.
So October was your biggest month
Ever.
ever.
Yeah.
I know what happens in October.
Do you?
Yeah, Halloween in thrift stores.
Well, funnily enough. So you've all just had an opportunity to try Crust Craft Bakery. That's our fourth social enterprise up and coming. So we have one marketing officer who's been completely inundated with the launch of Crust Craft Bakery, official grand opening this Saturday, November 5th, 38 Pearson Street. So we were having our biweekly check-in yesterday, and I gave the stat. It's a huge number. I'd love to share it, but I won't because it's not classy. But it's a great number.
You're with Brad.
And we said, the irony that we've not had any marketing this month because our resources are so tight, it was like, where do we put our marketing right now? This new business really needs the attention. Neighborhood's doing great. We can do without. We didn't do one Halloween post. Instagram, Facebook, nothing. We didn't mention Halloween. And we still had a record-breaking month. So
Customers may have known about Halloween. So during COVID, people were buying masks and PC and all that stuff, and that was probably a pretty dynamic market. Mm-hmm. Now that that's over, how do you pivot and find new customers?
Well, that is regarding Task Force NL. I am wearing two hats here. So in Task Force NL, after COVID came more soft, let's say, what I love of Task Force NL board, it is a really active board, people really eager to help this province, and they say, okay, let's move on to another challenge then. And they decide to come with immigration. I will say that I push a lot for that because as an immigrant that suffer many challenges, I can come with the problems, the real problems, not the ones that you hear or you see in the news, the real ones. So after that, the board decided to move there, and we find a niche in immigration, which is like tough to find a new niche in immigration, which is a huge topic from years, that employers was really isolated. It is like, the mandate is like hiring immigrants. So employers are like, okay, how I do that? Because looks like it's pretty complex to navigate the system. If a native Canadian cannot navigate for 20 minutes a website from government, well, we have an issue. So Task Force NL decided to advocate for them and stand up for them and do things more easy and try to explore the opportunity to them in how to hiring immigrants and how immigrants and diversity can be a huge help and something positive for your company. And things are more easy than people think about it, and in how to hiring, in how to embrace multiculturalism in your company if you don't have any kind of diversity yet. And it's pretty like, we discovered that many employers feel shame even to ask, because that is recognized that they don't know, and they don't know how to approach to this. So that is our mission right now in Task Force NL, and so far we are running this approach for the past 7 months, and we are being really successful. Now we will help the government to join, to host the 3rd job fair for Ukrainians and Afghans that arrive to our province. And in the next month, we will work with 100 Ukrainians to try and to get employment for them, because as they don't come as refugees, they don't come with privilege, they don't come with housing, they don't come with permanent residence. So it is a really challenging topic for us, but we are ready to take it. So
It's really fascinating to hear what's driving all the difference, whether, rural economic development and keeping a small business alive and going is so important. We're seeing so much of that transition. So if you can change your hat, and I'm going to play the role of head of procurement for the province. And so I'm going to come to you and ask each of you to give us some advice, because we're thinking about doing some procurement that actually impacts the province. Because we collect, this is one of my sticks, governments collect money and they always talk about how much taxes, and people complain about the taxes, about how much they have to pay. We don't often have a discussion of how do we spend taxes. And so we're trying to figure out as government, what's the best way to spend some money? Because we're buying all this stuff. What's your advice?
I would love for government to change that perspective of, we have to buy something, so where am I going to buy it? It should be, these are the goals that we need to achieve in order to support our province. Who is going to help that? So if it is, at-risk youth is one of those key things, then you would be reaching out to support organizations that are currently on the ground dealing with that. So it's not just looking at the products and services that need to exchange hands, it's the overarching goals of what the province wants to achieve and what that social enterprise or that for-profit enterprise wants to also achieve. So aligning those goals first, and then making sure that the products and services that are needed to be done can be sourced within that network.
Give me an example of how I can buy something and achieve my social goals too.
Well, it's interesting. We, a couple of years ago, met a business owner, and this gentleman has, 300 or 400 employees, and he himself still thinks that he's a small business owner. And then compared to the businesses that the CBDCs work with, it's completely different scales. This gentleman's big business, and I'm going to say it's big even though he says it was small, in addition to selling their products, they wanted to make sure that education of the employees and the youth that they as a byproduct serve. So in addition to selling, whether it be a car, they're also talking about what some of the revenue that's coming in and how they give back to the community. So by making a pitch to the provincial government of buying or leasing so many of our vehicles from our company, in addition to this many wheels on the road, some of this profits is also supporting these educational programs that are in service. So I think it's really important to kind of change that conversation back to goals versus, the actual transaction that's going ahead at that point in time.
So I suspect the province buys food.
I think that's an accurate assessment.
So why should I bother looking for a social enterprise?
So, I mean, the province, has already have labor market strategies and, have been great supporters of workforce development in the labor market and through directly funding organizations to deliver a variety of programming, literacy programming, pre-employment career development things. The beauty of having the conversation with respect to the purchase of goods and services, such as a delicious catered meal from such a provider, is that you are indirectly supporting that which you are. It's another approach to work with and achieve some of the goals of diversifying the labor market, including people who were previously not included, validating, supporting, and creating a whole host of rewards that are not patronizing, but are based on a good product that's tasty, delicious, delivered on time, hot, and it allows for the opportunity for people who do well in a non-traditional training environment to learn those skills and raise their income and the social determinants of health. I mean, it's so parallel with everything else that you're already engaged in. Why wouldn't you also incorporate that into your purchasing? You can say, where those impacts are for things you're looking for.
Is it going to cost me more?
And the beauty of it all is that the determination that you make with respect to the purchase is going to be based on the vendor's ability to deliver that across all the criteria that you include in your purchasing decision. And you're already acknowledging and supporting and valuing diversity in the workforce and lifting up the quality of life of individuals. That this is so parallel and supportive of that approach.
Can I interrupt right there? It doesn't cost more. The product itself, buying food, that may be qualified as a higher purchase point, but then the cost of having these people, or sorry, I shouldn't say the cost, the benefit of having more employment, less people being reliant on other programs and services by being active in the community. So broadening that perspective of what the cost actually is, it would actually go to show that working with local communities and purchasing from them is actually generating more revenue for the communities. It's certainly generating more at a rural level and even definitely at the provincial level.
Well, it's a value, right?
Yeah.
What is the value behind the
Yeah.
purchase?
Even the simple economic multiplier,
Yep.
the research done in rural BC that when you bought from a local business, 65% of the money stayed in the community. If you ordered from Amazon, 14 cents stayed in the community.
Yep.
The delivery person got paid. So it's kind of fascinating when we try to convince the purchaser that there's value. So when you go to pitch a sale, what do? Go in and say, I got the lowest price?
No. I say maybe the cost is high, the quality is amazing, but you are supporting a newcomer women. I show who is behind of the machine. So we are part of the slow fashion approach and the fashion revolution to show who is making your hat, because can be your children's in the future or can be a women. So how you as a mother or parents are supporting, like you are supporting this. So every time that you buy a hat from Newfoundlander, you are buying social. They know, and we have a great awareness about what it is. And I think Newfoundlanders feel pretty proud about our company for that same reason. And that is our unique value proposition, and that makes us so sustainable right now. So.
Are you the only thrift store I can go to in St. John's?
You are absolutely not the only thrift store.
No, you are.
Sorry?
Are you the only one?
No.
So why should I choose you?
Funny question. You should choose us because we have been completely transparent about, I'm sure it's not news. People know what business, especially big thrift stores, I don't need to name them. People know who they are. One of them, even in recent news, has gone so far to publicly state that their mandate does not involve charity or it is a for-profit business. So we've been completely transparent about what it is we do. It's quite literally written on the wall when you come into neighborhood, our story and why you should shop with us. But at the end of the day, thrift is thrift. You go not knowing what you're going to find. There is no real competitive advantage over what we offer in terms of clothing because it's secondhand clothing. You get what you get. Certainly we put a big effort into sorting and making the experience really nice, and it's clean and it smells good and there's a lovely vibe in there and it's all inclusive and we do all those great things. But ultimately, no different than creating a product locally, we're selling with a social value so that these young people can have jobs and stay, hopefully, in our community at work. And again, that return on your investment is so much more, than you getting, a shirt for $4. It's that young person, that, again, social return on investment is that young person, just received a paycheck for 76 hours. And in doing so, are off of, this support, and suddenly that, $1 investment looks like $1.86 in terms of that social return. So you absolutely should, shop at our store and read the wall.
So if anyone has any questions, this is an amazing resource you have here, these four. So anyone who has a question or wants to add to the discussion, let's try to do that. It's a small group, so we don't have to be quite as formal as like we're over here and you're over there. So anyone who has any questions?
I have a question. So my question is, what's your biggest challenge? Like, hot seat, what's your biggest challenge?
Being able to scale up. The clients that we work with struggle with the idea of being able to scale up to service contracts, whereas they need to be able to feel confident in being able to advocate for a smaller contract or working with somebody else in their community that can help scale up. That's definitely the biggest thing that we see is people are nervous about taking it on. I don't know if I can meet the demand. Or if they get the contract, that challenge with, can I still operate? Will I meet the needs of the contract?
I'm going to answer Carol Ann's question by also adding in a comment. So I'm going to just pretend like I'm wearing two hats here. I own businesses in private sector. I'm responsible for 2+ businesses, social enterprises in the public sector as well. So in the province of Newfoundland, we're looking at, and social procurement is something that I am studying heavily right now. We are simultaneously looking at a huge problem with employment and unemployment. So in my private business, I'm having trouble hiring. I want to hire at a fair wage. I want to give a good experience. I want to have a family first mandate. I want to offer all of these things that I quite literally can't afford to do, combined with the constraints of COVID-19, so on and so forth. In my other hat, I'm employing a whole ton of young people, and it's not just me. There's other folks doing this work with different, different vulnerable groups, but they need employment. So they need employment in the competitive space. I need employees that I want to offer a fair wage to. We look at procurement and how government gets involved. Procurement and purchasing is so much more than just buying goods. Mm-hmm. I'm not at all insinuating that you purchase people, but you definitely can purchase opportunity if you have the funds to do so. So what could businesses like mine do if they could unlock some capital to employ some of those folks and give that same return on investment that you would see in a social enterprise? Because ultimately, if thrift is thrift, then my goods are also my goods, but that experience for the young person stays the same. So how do we marry private and public sector, and how can social procurement help?
My big challenge is time. I think, and don't have time is like a lack of priority. I think I have so many priorities right now with task personnel, with newborn lander growing and growing and growing. And also I empower, I think, so well my team that they are giving me like so much freedom, but I am the one in charge to grow the business. So if I will have more time and will be able to create more time, I will take it because I think that stuck me a little bit. But further than that, I think as we are like learning at the time the business is growing and we are overcoming challenges, I would say really well. And I feel really proud about that because actually my team, they are great problem solvers. So growing and in task personnel, showing value. I think sometimes government takes so long time to recognize value. And I think it's not doubt about immigration. It's a huge topic and the immigration ecosystem should be and be more solid. And I think that is a challenge.
I'm going to say there's the tension between the social and financial kind of activities, I guess, of the social enterprise, and it looks different we operate an initiative called Clean Start, which is a commercial cleaning business. You can imagine how a company that can offer disinfecting services was doing during a pandemic. It was really experiencing some growth associated with those opportunities. With the Hungry Heart, you can imagine being part of the food service industry, and talk about paradigm shifts. The market has really, so the challenges are the dynamic tension then between the predictability of revenue and for me, procurement would help introduce some predictability from the perspective of the nature of a piece of business that would be ongoing and presumably deliverable with over a time frame and contract that would allow us to leverage all the benefits that we already know about the human capital and the workforce development that would be possible.
So there's a mic floating around if anyone has a question. I'm going to switch that around from the biggest challenge to what's your greatest opportunity that you see in the next couple of years?
I would say that just a shift in some of this. So we have a program that's called the Youth Ventures Program, and it teaches youth how to start up small businesses. So we had quite a few that started up this year, and you always ask them, well, where do you get your products, and why, where are you sourcing it, and why? And we're seeing more and more talking about, well, I'm getting this particular piece from Springdale because I know it's made here. So I think while, 20 years ago, that product, those products and services were all locally bought, and then with increasing online purchases, you started to see that shift away to all on wherever you could, the lowest cost. Now I'm starting to see that pendulum swing back. So I think that's the biggest opportunity, is that who we're seeing coming up, the next business owners, the future leaders, really know the value of supporting local, and how does that impact their business as well as their community.
Marilyn?
I think it's absolutely in employment. So if, again, to marry the two hats, getting people to work, however that looks like, helping those folks that need a hand up, and also those of us in public sector on a small business scale who need help. And if you marry the two, I think that we could answer a lot of our own hardships if we just really look at who's unemployed and why and how we get them employed.
Greatest opportunity.
For New Borlander, social succession plan, I think, is the future in how the for-profit can pass to be a non-for-profit sector and be absorbed for a charity. So I think that is the goal for New Borlander. And for Task Force NL, for sure, grow, show value, and especially after the announcement of the Minister John Fraser that will become more immigrants now, I hope that we can have the solutions ready before they come.
Greatest opportunity, Rob?
Employment and quality of life related to the ongoing paradigm shift, universal basic income, Fair and 15, revisiting the income support system, and the labor market. I think we're at a point where everything is being reconsidered, both from an opportunity perspective and then the compensation that people potentially will be able to access, and the terms under which people come to appreciate and understand work, because at the end of the day, there are going to be, we aren't going to have to rely on the prescription drug plan of the province, that employers are offering benefits that they never did before. We're not there yet, but there's a better opportunity.
Such a fabulous theme that all of you share, which is none of you have talked about business as a traditional model. All of you have talked about how it builds community wealth, which is really kind of fascinating, because I think if we'd had this panel some years ago, we wouldn't have had that kind of discussion of what we can do and what we can help with. So, Marianne, we're early. Are you going to be upset?
No, but maybe some questions, some discussion you want to explore? Yeah.
There's a question in the back. Great.
Thanks. I have a question around the connection between the community sector and the private sector, and how do you marry those interests between both? so that when you're making a deal with a private sector company, your community sector organization, how do you get the private sector to buy into that, the value of doing the social procurement piece?
So from my experience, there's actually a couple different ways. A lot of people have never been asked, and they really want to do good stuff. And so no one ever went to them and said, who's in your supply chain, and have you thought about where you get your catering? Have you thought about where you buy your caps? Have you thought about what you do with your unused materials? Have you thought about local businesses to be in your supply chain? Where do you get your staff when you're looking? So some of it is, I don't think we've been very good at always listening to what the private sector is trying to do and accomplish. Because I think yesterday we had a great conversation with the owner of a tech company here who's like making the effort to try to find women to bring them into the tech sector. And it's a challenge, but he's taken it on, right? So I think there's private sector people who really, the beginning of social procurement was really from the tech sector, a bunch of philanthropists who said, how can we help the downtown east side? We don't want to just write checks. And we said, oh, why don't you hire some people from the downtown east side? And they said, we're tech companies. We hire really specialized, we don't have entry-level jobs. And then we said, aha, but you buy cleaning, and you buy catering, and you buy all this stuff. Why don't you look at social enterprises as your market? So when they dawned on it, they were like, oh, that's cool. And I think the other thing that's been mentioned is, if you're a private sector company now, why is social procurement so important? If you're not doing it, you're not competitive with these guys. So I put out a request for proposals as the head of government procurement, and I say, I want to ensure that we're using small businesses. And I'm going to give a small business a 30-point advantage if they can meet this contract.
Right.
And also adding to that, I think like in my role with my company, we celebrate our social procurement and we do it really transparent. So for example, where we bought the fabrics and the slow fashion approach, and educate our customer that their hat would be take time because we need to make it. And because the fabric take a month to arrive, because it's a slow fashion approach company and environmental friendly, and that is a cost that everyone should be paid. And you are paying by the price and by your patient. But I think also when I have companies that buy from my shop, so in wholesale, I celebrate them. And I say, check this company, they are buying local, they are helping us, they are supporting newcomer women, so go there and buy there. So I think also celebrate and create awareness is key, and to educate also customer. And to have a better engage with the private, that of course business is business, but also the social piece, one can be involved 100% with social procurement, so.
Cleaning, eh?
Oh, totally. And to say, I think the private sector, for-profit, they're there through, corporate social responsibility and beyond. And there's so many great, rich examples from the tech sector and elsewhere of business owners responding to their own values and the values of their employees if they want to be a vital place and retain staff, like having those, we've seen that purchasing decision with cleaning and others. And then the opportunity for, for those who are worried about the scale of procurement, and bidding on those contracts, there's great opportunities for partnerships. Clean Start can't clean an 80,000 square foot property. We can clean a 15,000 square foot property, happy to provide some of the diversity to a larger cleaner and be part of a subcontractor with that response. So lots of opportunities that way.
Yeah. One of the big things for government procurement is they buy big, right? But most of those big bidders who win the bids don't actually do anything. connected to the product or service. So like this company called BGIS has a contract, $26 billion a year contract to clean every federal building across Canada. I don't think anyone at BGIS picks up a broom. I've had a minister tell me they should because his office wasn't cleaned. But that means what's the supply chain opportunities? Like you get to a rural community, somebody cleans the post office.
I think even when it comes to the rural perspective, that if the business doesn't have this altruistic appeal to wanting to provide social services, they're going to get to the point for a Newfoundland Labrador, they will have no choice but to work with the community sector, because our communities, we don't have as many people coming into them as quick as what we need to see. So I think you will have to see the community sector and the private sector working together to make sure that Plum Point still has a lot of people coming in to work in their businesses, that Goose Bay still has an influx of brand new materials coming in that can be sold at all of the stores. So I think those that may not support working together will ultimately have to at some point in order to make sure this province remains viable.
And I think too, and I just, you know, again, something that I've been studying heavily around social procurement and starting to understand as I look at my own business and how I add social value. As you know, you talked about, businesses are starting to want to be more creative and get involved and add social value to what it is they already do. But looking at and really understanding how you can incorporate a procurement policy and looking at also what you're already doing. So I know some of you were in a room with me recently and I gave this example and I'm going to say it again because I really mean it. Careful to say, you know, certainly if people want to donate, but how many companies are willing to donate a chunk of money or businesses to a nonprofit like ours? Irving Oil, for example, you know, you'll donate a big sum of money, but what about a big company or a small company saying, hey, I either want to get rid of some money or I can't afford to give some money, but I can give you a job opportunity for a young person. So procurement in that sense, again, to go back to people, I don't have the money to do it, but I can take somebody on, especially if I'm supported. That in and of itself is a way to have a social procurement practice in your job. And also, when we talk about, you know, how you buy things, people often, they think it's more complicated than it needs to be. And I know it just sounds really basic, but even in one of my small little businesses, everybody spends money. Like, where are you spending your money? How are you spending your money? And we don't, unfortunately, ever, as a province, have a bank of, you know, Buy Social Canada has a bank of social value businesses. We don't have one as a province, nor do we have a procurement policy in place at this juncture. But I would challenge everybody, if you have the space to do so, to look at the money you're already spending and then kind of work backwards from there and see what's available, because it's actually quite surprising what's out there in this province of ours that may be able to, the money you're already spending. And again, I'm coming from a lens in private sector of having a budget line that I have to meet. And if it's money you're spending anyway, there may be a better way to spend it. And if you can't do that, maybe think about how you could tap into the employment side.
So we have a question from online. I don't know if this is on. Okay, so it's from Kim Todd. So Kim, if you're still online, hello. We know Kim. What is your customer demographic and why do they choose you?
Mine's anybody outside outside of St. John's and Mount Pearl that can start a business. And we want them to. Very simple.
That's a complicated answer when you're looking at a bunch of different businesses. Yeah. But if you're looking for a social value business, definitely check out Choices for Youth and our offerings. And I'm going to leave it there.
Well, for me, parents, young parents, I would say, yeah, young parents that want to have a special heart for the children. But the beneficiaries are the newcomer women. So they are I am thinking on them when I am developing the business or making something, you know.
Two industries at least, or three with us, but so I might take the Choices approach to that answer. But you know, there 15 years ago, the Hungry Heart Cafe would have appealed to an older demographic. We're definitely noticing that our patrons, diners are across the lifespan now, as we've been introduced to, through the university and other avenues, different market segments, for sure.
And the food is yummy, which is why you want to go to the
And it's probably not that different than the question about private sector, because again, it's people who are already spending money. If you're already eating out, you're already shopping. So if you're just an individual practicing some sort of social purchasing, look at what you're doing.
So it's value alignment,
Exactly.
right? It's complete value alignment.
Even with that value alignment piece, like if there's an organization that's looking to purchase services and products from the province and you cannot find it, there are so many people that are looking for those opportunities. So even letting everybody know what it is that you need, if it can't be sourced here, there may be somebody that can either broaden the scope of the business that they currently are operate, or somebody can start up something new. So it's making sure that whole concept of looking at what it is that you need and how can we add the most value here in Newfoundland and Labrador to it.
All right, we have another one from Sam Woodford. And he says, first of all, thanks for being part of this. It's great to have Sam online. He said, Roseanne made a great point about small businesses being nervous or sheltered in regards to taking a risk in expansion of products and services. And absolutely. And, certainly in procurement, the bid packages are getting bigger and bigger, and they need to be broken down. So his question is, what is the best path a small social enterprise can take in persuading its long-tenured board of directors, managers, or other higher-ranking staff that such a risk could pay tremendous dividends? Oh, I love that question.
Yeah, I've never heard that one before.
Do you want me to repeat it? You good?
They have
No.
boards of directors by them, boards of directors.
So I actually think, and for a number of years, I ran a program called Enterprising Nonprofits that did nothing more than support nonprofits and charities to look at building social enterprises. And we gave away money to help you do that. And we did programs and we wrote books. And I would say that the number one problem that stopped social enterprise from progressing and scaling and remains the same today is the risk aversion that's somehow built into the boards of directors. And I don't know, I grew up and I moved to Canada like 1999, 2000. And when I moved here and I went to one of my first like kind of nonprofit things, and I turned to the person sitting next to me and I said, what are they talking about? Why would we go ask government for permission to do something? And they said, and because where I came from as a community economic developer and a community organizer is we just did it. And we created our own boards and we were our boards. And I think there needs to be a revitalization of the nonprofit sector in terms of integrating, like you do it and you say it's two hats. I don't think it's two hats. I think it's one big hat that understands. And I think we somehow created boards that are risk averse. And these board members probably spent their whole day taking risks and buying things and selling things. And then they get into this nonprofit or charity boardroom, and somehow their hat changes.
Yeah.
So I don't know the solution other than like waiting until all of you are on boards. And
Well, there is something. So if we have the government, if we have the provincial government, you have municipal government, everybody talking about we need to purchase local with this particular social goal in mind. So if you have those that are in position to do the purchasing, talking about it, I think more and more boards, more and more organizations would feel more confident trying to take it on. So it's not just making sure internally we have the capacity to provide this contract. It's making sure that externally those that have the purchasing are saying, we're looking to work with you. We will support you. We want to choose you.
I think it really needs to start from the very beginning, which is a lot of boards, and I do a lot of board work. A lot of boards are bound by their bylaws.
Yeah.
And so the bylaws often say they can't take risk, right? Or that you can't take a loan, for example. So if the values of the board show risk, then you got to get everything else in check, right? Your bylaws and your governance policies in check. But it is really tone at the top. And so if you have a board that really truly values ESG, environmental, social, and governance within the boards, then there's a hope that some of these bylaws and rules and regs can change. Because right now, if you're a director on the board, and I am the chair of Food First, and Josh is sitting there as the CEO, if he doesn't pay his remittances for his staff, I as a board member am responsible for that. And so there is some risk there that board members are not interested in taking, so therefore you might need to shake up that board like a snow globe, get the skills that you need on that board to be able to understand the risk that you're taking.
Yeah, I think a lot of the staff have matured and moved into a more of a social enterprise model, and a lot of the board members don't quite capture that same understanding. So when you get someone like Carol Ann who runs a social enterprise on your board, she understands what are the things that are the risk and what are the things that are the things you've got to be mitigating in that process. And it's going to take a lot of education, but I think it's also, as it becomes more normal, that you can look at October income and report that to a board. Their risk aversion goes down with the success of the social enterprise, I think.
And I had an opportunity recently to work with another nonprofit who has a 34-year-old social enterprise. So it's not young by any means. It was a social enterprise by definition before it became, the movement that it is now, certainly. And they had a new ED come in who was looking to take this social enterprise and take it from a small social enterprise to a bigger, and again, we all toss around the words of like real business. Of course, it's a real business, but they came to me and wanted me to do some consulting on their model, and they had a lot of reservations around, they'd never really experienced any growth. There was no real risk, but there was also no growth. So there's this young, vibrant person who's come on as ED and wants to take this business up a notch and had been seeing some of the work that I've been doing, reached out, so on and so forth. And she gave me this big warning about the board holding this social enterprise near and dear to their heart. I mean, it was a passion project of the organization, but they're super risk averse, hesitant to any sort of change. I mean, I don't even know how I continued to do it. I should have just left then. But I went in and said, prepared for the worst, and I went in to meet this board virtually, of course, COVID, and approach was actually really important. And I mean, I'm somebody who, one of my skills, I would say, is people. So my first thought was, okay, knowing what I know about this board, but not knowing any of these people individually, I should probably see how I can get to know them a little bit individually so we could start to unpack that risk and the hesitation and the hard walls that this ED was coming up against before I said anything. So we spent the first hour of the meeting saying, what's your dream for this business? What do you want to see? Why have you held on to this passion project and you're not really making any money. You give a couple people a job, they're not making any money. It's kind of a volunteer thing. Like, why are we doing this? And so once we got back to that common goal and started to work backwards, the risks started to ease away. And by the third Zoom meeting, I had a ticket booked to travel, to go. And so that's not going to be the case for everybody, certainly. And Caroline and I have had many conversations about boards. But certainly when it comes to, small scale, I think that's where there's a ton of opportunity because people are on that board for a reason. So if you get to know your board members, just, tops of trees, why are they there? What would you like to see? What is the goal? Why does this thing exist? Why do you want it to exist? Have that conversation. You might be surprised that hesitation is certainly there, but the walls started to come down, and in the end, we created something really great. But you can work with risk aversion.
Yes. But there's also term limits. And there's time, when there's the time, that people need to move off the board. And that's an okay thing. And to have that new people, new blood, new ideas, and new risk takers is very, very healthy for an organization. And so oftentimes the smaller community-based ones, it's because it's a passion project. And people are there and they don't want to let it go. And they're like, that's my baby, right? And they never want to let go.
So we say let it go or let it grow.
Right. So that was a great question, Sam. If you're still online, obviously you can see the passion kind of fired up then. So we are on time. There's 10 minutes left. So it's 10 minutes between us and the pizza. So unless there's no other questions, if there's any final closing comments?
I want to thank everyone here. This is amazing work that you're all doing. And when we think about creating that social value marketplace, these are the pieces, right? Business development, employment opportunities, working with social inclusion, making sure that there's workforce development for everybody who wants a job. So I think this panel, really great work, and I think we start to talk about collaboration, and we start to talk about the opportunities. This is the learning, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for spending your time with us this afternoon. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody.